So on today's episode, we're going to be showing you how to make a straight through exhaust system for your Mitsubishi Delica. It's going to go straight from the center section where the flange is and come out just before the rear tire on the driver's side. So it's going to be a side exit. I need to apologize for the audio today because we're on a farm and it's really windy and there is wildlife everywhere and there's flies everywhere as well. Fucking fly in my eye. So you're just going to have to deal with what we're giving you. So to complete this today, you're going to need 1.5 meters of 2-inch exhaust pipe straight, 90-degree bend, 2-inch exhaust pipe. Then you're going to need a 2-inch exhaust flange with 2 bolt holes, and then you'll also need a gasket to go with that and 2 M12 bolts with nuts and washers. So without further ado, let's get started. For the first section, you're going to need to get down right in the middle of the vehicle here on the driver's side. It's where the flange is that you're going to have to undo. To undo it, you're going to need this 17mm socket on a ratchet. You might need a lever bar because it's quite tight. Sometimes they can be very rusted if they haven't been undone in a long time. Then you're also going to need some WD-40 or a penetrating spray of some sort, or you can just get raped by flies whilst you're doing it, which is really annoying. This is your flange just here, and you can see it's quite rusted. This is the original part of the vehicle. We're going to use the WD-40. I'm just going to spray it on here. So first things first, just let it sit on there. Same on the other side. Get a little bit on the other side here. And just let that soak in. Maybe give it 5 minutes or so for it to work its way in there. And then when you're ready, you can come back, get your socket on the end, and just undo her. The next job we've got to do, we've got to get the hangers and the exhaust rubbers free of the rear section of the exhaust. So I would start at the rear, take that one off, and work my way forward to the front. For the rear and the front hanger, it's an M12, and you probably want a small socket like this on a small ratchet. Got a rear one just up here, and the front one's just behind the back box. There's a third hanger that's just behind the center box here. It's on the other side over there. But to get to it, we're going to have to take off this, which is the heat shield. There's 2 bolts at the front, and there's 2 bolts at the rear, and there's 2 bolts that are hung on with this hanger in the middle. We've already got this one off, so just these 2, and we should be clear. What am I stuck to? Jesus! What is it? Is that stuck on a rivet? These are fantastic tools on this farm. Oh! Once you've got that center hanger off, the exhaust should drop. Then you need to come over to the back here and take off this bottom section of this mount. That will allow you to carry the exhaust through and out. This will be a lot easier with 2 people. You want to pull the exhaust this direction, and you should be able to work it over the rear axle and get it out from the side just here. The main reason why we're changing our exhaust system is because of this. Have a look at this. So, down here, there's a lovely section here. Nothing comes out of these at all. Now we've got the exhaust off, we can start mocking up with the new pipe, and we're going to need something to hold it in place whilst we do that. You can use axle stands, you can use a box, you can use anything you've got available to you, but you want to do something like this. Get the first section held up straight, and you can see it's as close as I can get it to the flange, roughly at the angle I want it to come off at. Then you want to get the second section and line it up with where you want it to come out at the side. So when you've lined it up, you want to get some sort of marker. This isn't going to be the most accurate system in the world. Obviously I'm just doing it by eye, but probably going to want to make a cut somewhere around about there on that pipe. Remember, whenever you're using power tools, you want to make sure you want to have safety goggles, some ear defenders, and preferably some sort of hand protection, just because sparks and things like that, they can be a little bit painful. The next thing we're going to do is take the burrs off the edges of the pipe, just so that when we weld it, it's a nice clean surface. So before you actually weld it for real, you probably want to do a bit of practice welding. I cut this small section at the end of the pipe off that we don't need, and then I've just done some practice welding to make sure that the settings are correct on our welder, and just to make sure that I'm happy that I'm used to welding again. Basically, it's been a while. It's a bit rough, but it'll do. So once you've got your settings correct, you want to mount up your first sections of pipe. You're going to have your straight section and your 90-degree section just here. And you want a small gap to weld into, very small, maybe like about 1 mil or so thick. That's usually what I tend to go with. I mean, the professionals might do it slightly different, but always worked for me like this and been a solid weld. So we're going to tack it right here on the top, and then once we've tacked it in place, we should be able to take this off and it will hold itself strong. It's not the prettiest, but solid. Each time you complete a section, you want to bring it back underneath the vehicle and just face it up. Make sure that you are on the correct path, everything's going in the direction you want it to. And then obviously you just measure the next section you want to weld up and take it back over, weld that in place, come back over, face it up. It's just a process of making sure you're happy with everything you're doing. If you're unsure and there's a section that could be tricky, then just tack it with 1 or 2 welds, bring it over, face it up. If it looks right, weld it up. If it doesn't, you can just grind them off and then you can try again. A pro tip from someone who is definitely not a professional: you should always try and weld down, never try and weld up, because you're going against gravity. What happens is the weld will pull and it will fall, and then it won't actually penetrate into the gap that you're trying to fill. So try and use gravity to your advantage. Solid, sealed, it'll do. Right, now we've come to the end of most of the welding. We've got the flange on at the front here, we've got the 90-degree section on at the back here, and then we've got the remainder welded on as the tailpipe exit. So now the next thing we're going to do after we've finished all of that is we're going to get it set up in a position where we are happy that that's where we want it to sit. So use whatever you can once again to prop it in that position, and bolt up the flange so that you definitely know it is where it will sit. Then you want to make a mounting bracket for the center just here. Now what I've done is I'm using the center mounting bracket in the rubber grommet, and I'm going to use a flat section of bar to weld to the exhaust pipe and then put a hole in it so that we can bolt it on at the top here to the rubber section, and that should give us a nice solid setup. If we need it, there is another section at the end down here where we can then also add a second one, but we might not need it. Let's see how we get on first of all. Now I've tacked on the arm, I can go and face it up to the vehicle and actually mount it to the rubber. I've only used 2 tacks either side, that way I can slightly bend it into position wherever I need it to be. Once I've done that, I'll come back over and then I'll weld it up on here. Okay, so good news is I've just gone and faced it up and it fits perfectly. So now I'm just going to stick some proper decent welds in there and make sure that it's nice and secure. Make sure it's not going to let the exhaust fall off whilst we're doing a bit of 4x4 driving. That would suck. So now I've got everything mounted up. I haven't used the gasket. Okay, I've mounted everything without the gasket so that I can see exactly where I want the tailpipe to be cut, and so that I know exactly where everything sits underneath. And the good news is it hangs really nicely. It's pretty solid and it shouldn't shake around too much. So next thing is to measure up the rear tailpipe cut and then put the gasket in, start it. We're going to go for a 45-degree angle, which should allow us to have the exhaust gases directed towards the ground, and then it stops it going out the side and potentially hitting people standing next to the vehicle. This is how you professionally fit an exhaust.
The final piece.
Thank you, ma'am. Having an assistant definitely helps. And that's it, we're in. We've got the flange in place with the gasket in between. All this section is welded up to the hinge so that it can be mounted on the top just here. We've got the 90-degree section and then the tailpipe down the end down there. So there's only one thing left to do. Ooh, baby. High five! So once you've gone for a test drive and you know that there's no air leaks in it and you've finalized everything, you want to go and put a coat of high temperature paint on the exhaust. It's going to protect it from rusting, especially if you're using mild steel, and it's just going to make it look a little bit nicer underneath the body. So once you've given it 24 hours for the paint to dry, you're ready to install the new exhaust system. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy. It's looking pretty good. So that should hopefully give you a rough idea how to fit a straight through exhaust pipe on your Mitsubishi Delica. It's going to be very similar if you're fitting it to any other vehicle as well, but at the end of the day, it's just about going out there, giving it a crack and having some fun. We'll see you in the next video, guys.